Assalamu alaikum and welcome to part 2 of Quran Rehab Seasons of the Heart series. Did you know that almost half of the entire Quran consists of stories? Now the vast majority of these stories relate to our amazing role models, the prophets, peace be upon them. And today inshallah we're going to speak about one of those great prophets that was mentioned most in the Quran. In fact, he was mentioned so frequently and in so much detail that a famous mufassir once said that the Quran itself almost became the narration of his story. Which prophet was this? Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Now when we look at the stories Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relates to us about the life of Prophet Musa, there is one emotion that is quite strongly associated with his life experiences, and that is fear. So inshallah today the topic we're going to explore is fear. And we're going to explore this emotion through the life of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and we're going to try to derive some lessons from the Quran on how we can practically manage this emotion effectively. I just wanted to clarify that although emotions are part and parcel of our tests, the purpose of emotions are not in and of themselves to test us, because our emotions actually serve a higher purpose, and that purpose is to call us to action. So those so-called negative emotions that you experience are in fact actually indicating to us that something is not quite right and that we need to take specific action accordingly. So what exactly does the emotion of fear indicate, and what kind of action can we take? Well, fear, generally speaking, is the anticipation of something that's going to happen. And the Quran identifies 2 specific action steps that we can take to effectively manage that, inshallah. So the first step of dealing with fear effectively is what you might call a 2-sided coin. So it's either to take practical action to try and change your situation, to avoid that which you're anticipating and fearing from happening, or alternatively to prepare yourself to be able to deal with what you're anticipating when it actually happens. An example of the first here is in the life of Musa, is when Musa alayhi salam accidentally killed an Egyptian man whilst trying to assist an Israelite in need of his help. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فأصبح في المدينة خائفا يترقب. So Musa alayhi salam naturally felt fear of being identified and punished for this crime, potentially with his life. And then subhanAllah, when that fear became very real, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes on to tell us, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وجاء رجل في الأقصى المدينة يسعى قال يا موسى إن الملأ يأتمرون بك لتقتلون. So when a man came and approached Musa, informing him that in fact, yes, the chiefs of the country had actually decided to kill him, he immediately fled Egypt. So in response to this fear, which became very real, Musa alayhi salam took immediate action to try to change his situation. But an interesting observation here to learn from also is that before Musa alayhi salam actually fled, he did go about his daily business even though he still felt that fear. And it was only until the fear was confirmed to be very real that he took the action. And that teaches us that there is a pre-step to dealing with fear, and that is to ensure that the fears that we do have are in fact rational and reasonable fear. And we can do that through self-reflection, and sometimes that's achieved through consultation with others also. Now an example of where Musa alayhi salam instead prepares himself for that which he fears as opposed to trying to change it can be seen in one of the most beautiful incidences mentioned in the Quran. And that was where he met with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the very first time and they spoke directly. Now during this meeting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Musa a huge and terrifying task, and that was to go and physically approach Fir'aun, who was the tyrant, the biggest tyrant of his time, and who Musa had previously fled and had no intention of going and approaching again. And to actually ask him to cease in his wrongdoings and to order him to submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now in response to this order, Musa alayhi salam begins to reflect on some personal limitations that cause him fear. Primarily his speech impediment and his previous crime in Egypt, which was punishable. So in response to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قال رب إني أخاف أن يكذبون ويضيق صدري ولا يمتلق لساني فأرسل إلى هارون ولا على ذنب فأخاف أن يقتلون. So in response to this fear, he immediately takes practical action to prepare himself by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to equip him with the support and strength of his brother in carrying out his tasks. Now, although it seems logical that a person who fears failing an exam, for example, needs to ensure that they do solid revision, or a person who fears taking on a new job role needs to ensure that they do some research into what's required of them, unfortunately, the sad reality is that common sense is not always common practice. And more importantly, I think that the Quran takes this concept of preparation to a whole new level. Now, this type of concept is demonstrated in an incident in the life of Prophet Musa ﷺ when he had fled Egypt with Bani Israel. And they had Fir'aun and his terrifying men pursuing them, and they stood in front of the Red Sea. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Musa an incredible and extraordinary order. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فأوحينا إلى موسى أن أضرب بعصاك البحر فانفلق فكان كل فرق كالطود العظيم. So let me ask you this. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really need Musa's participation in his decreeing of the sea parting? What exactly was the significance of a wooden stick in creating this huge miracle? The answer is no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of all needs. He simply says be and it is. And no stick on earth could in and of itself create such a huge miracle. So why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him this order? Allah is teaching us a very significant and important lesson. And that is that we are to literally take every single possible means to an end. Whether that be physical, mental, financial, political, regardless of how seemingly small or insignificant that act might be. Just as Musa ﷺ hit the sea with his staff. Now this lesson is echoed throughout many stories in the Quran. For example, we see when Maryam ﷺ had just gone through the difficulties of labour and given birth to Isa, and she required some sustenance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered her to physically shake the palm of a tree. Now in her condition, we know that that would make no significant difference. And we know even beforehand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to provide for her food directly to the doors of her masjid via angels. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us to do our part. Again, we see it in the example of Nuh alayhi salam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders him to build a wooden ark in preparation from some terrifying and intense floods that were to come. Now we know that under no normal circumstances could an ark survive such intense battering from the sea. But again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us to do our part, to make our utmost effort in doing so, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then do his part. We just need to prove ourselves worthy of his assistance. So to recap the first step in dealing with fear, we are to, inshallah, through reflection or consultation, to determine whether our fear is in fact rational and reasonable, and if so, then to prepare ourselves either by trying to change the situation or by trying to prepare ourselves for it. And in order to do so, inshallah, we are to think of every single possibility, regardless of how seemingly small or insignificant. And then we are to also exert just as much effort in taking action, inshallah. Now this will require of us to be creative, to be bold and courageous, to be determined. But this is the opportunity for personal growth, inshallah. My name is Halimah. You've been checked into Quran Rehab. So until next time, take care.